days and 3 nights. Make sure you share the live stream with your Christian friends. Share the video. Send a link. Send a link to your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, your church buddies, and everyone else in between, family, if you will. We're going to talk about something that's really, really interesting tonight, or today, I should say. Matthew 12, verse 40. Matthew 12, verse 40. According to Matthew, Jesus said, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." So we're right in the middle of the Easter season right now, a time when millions of people around the world are reflecting on the crucifixion and resurrection narratives. Since today is Saturday, the 7th day, the biblical Sabbath, I want us to talk about the profound reality, if you will, of the Sabbath for those of us who recognize the eternal aspects, if you will, of the Torah. We know that this Saturday isn't just a welcomed day of rest, isn't just another weekday. It is a set-apart day. As we'll see, the Sabbath plays a pivotal, undeniable role in the historical reality of what happened during the first century Passover week. Last night, we waded into some of the stark contradictions found between the gospel accounts regarding the crucifixion story. And yes, it's okay to admit it. It's okay that it's okay to have contradictions between the gospels. The only reason why somebody would say that it's not okay is because, well, it's in the Bible, and the Bible has to be perfect. The Bible has to be the inerrant, infallible, all-authoritative Word of God. But who designed the Bible? Who put it in the Bible? The Bible is just a library of books. Okay? So this is the problem here. Just because something's in the Bible doesn't necessarily mean that it's perfect, because the Bible is a library of books that was populated by men, and most of which are anonymous men, by the way, men that we don't even know who their names were. The only real proper name that we can point to in regards to the actual canon is the 1st century or 2nd century heretic Marcion. All right. So last night we looked at the text and we looked at them side by side, so to speak, on Good Friday. But today we're going to tackle something that trips up almost every single reader of the New Testament at one point in their lives. It's a math problem. It's the famous 3 days and 3 nights dilemma. If you grew up in church, or if you have ever tried to map out the Easter weekend, you know the struggle. The traditional timeline states that Jesus was crucified on Friday afternoon and rose from the grave before dawn on Sunday morning. You can count the parts of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to get 3 days, but you cannot, no matter what kind of chronological gymnastics you attempt, squeeze 3 nights into that timeline. You have Friday night and Saturday night. That's 2. What do we do with this? What do we do with the 3 days, 3 nights? Apologists have bent over backwards. They will invent Wednesday crucifixions or Thursday crucifixions and complex overlapping festival calendars to try to force the math to work so that Jesus was literally in the tomb for 72 hours. But from a critical biblical scholarship point of view, we don't have to play games. We just have to read the text carefully and recognize who is actually doing the talking here. Here is the point-blank truth that we need to establish right out of the gate. The Gospel of Matthew, written by an anonymous author. You might say, oh, no, it's not anonymous. We know it's Matthew. How do you know? Just because some church father said it and other church fathers have parroted it along the way? It's church tradition that tells you it's Matthew. And which Matthew? If it is Matthew, which Matthew? There's lots of Matthews. The only gospel, the Gospel of Matthew, that says this, 3 days and 3 nights. No other gospel has this in there. No other gospel has 3 days and 3 nights. Mark does not say it. Luke does not say it. John does not say it. Mark, the earliest gospel, simply records Jesus predicting he will rise after 3 days. That's it. Luke repeatedly uses the phrase on the 3rd day. It's only in Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, where we find this highly specific, highly problematic measurement. You might say, well, so it's not problematic. It works, Jesus, Jesus was crucified on Wednesday, or Jesus was crucified on Thursday. It doesn't work, folks. That doesn't work against the Good Friday historical knowledge that Jesus was crucified on Friday, and that he had to be taken down for the Sabbath, and that he rose on the first day of the week. We know that the Synoptic Gospels contradict the Gospel of John in regards to the timing of the Last Supper and the timing of the crucifixion. Completely different day. So we got multiple problems here we must deal with. If Matthew is the lone author adding this specific, quote unquote, 3 nights right here, if Matthew is the lone author that adds this detail, it forces us to ask the very logical, very necessary question: is this something Matthew has a habit of doing? Does Matthew have a habit of adding things like this? Adding to the text? Adding to the narrative of other Gospels? We know that Matthew copied from the Gospel of Mark. This is a well-known fact in biblical scholarship. Does the author of Matthew have a track record of adding texts like this? 3 nights, like 3 days and 3 nights. Adding stuff to the text. Blowing things up to make them more dramatic or more impactful. The answer is an undeniable, verifiable yes. To understand the 3 days and 3 nights issue, you have to understand. You have to face it, face the facts. Matthew's modus operandi is to do this kind of stuff. Matthew is a brilliant theological writer. It's one of my personal favorite Gospels, by the way. I love the Gospel of Matthew. But he is writing with an agenda. We have to understand this. We have to recognize this. We have to admit this. He is constantly doctoring the historical data, if you will. He's constantly amplifying the narratives he inherits from Mark, adding things to it, sometimes outright altering the facts to fit the theological narrative, sometimes to make it more impactful, sometimes to make it more memorable, sometimes just to add emphasis. You might say, oh, you're accusing Matthew of lying? No, not necessarily. I'm not. Okay? Because you must understand that this is a way of thought. This is a way of writing amongst Jewish culture. It's called Haggadah. It's making stories up for the purpose of teaching or conveying an underlying moral, for the purpose of emphasis, for the purpose of memory, to memorize something. And some of us do this kind of stuff today, even. In order for us to memorize a certain word, we relate it to another word or to a fictitious story. You think about the The little train, what's the name of that story? The little train that could, or something like that. The engine. I remember even as a little boy reading this story, where you got the story of the train that could hardly make it up the mountain, and he had to have the willpower. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. Until finally he made it up and over the mountain. Of course, that's not a true story. That a train engine would talk to itself like that. Of course, it's not true. But it conveys a truth, and that is, you can do a lot through willpower, and the lack thereof can be a great obstacle to you. And sometimes the obstacle is not necessarily the mountain; it's the willpower. So that's kind of like a Haggadah. Are you going to condemn the author of that story as a liar? No, because I think we all understand that it's just a story. We all understand this is not true, but it has a good moral to it. It's a moral. The moral of the story is a really good, positive message of truth. Willpower. Be positive. In the same way, this is how it seems that Matthew is writing. It's called in the Jewish world Haggadah. So I want to spend some time proving this to you, showing you clear, undeniable instances of Matthew doctoring the text in other places. Because we have to ask, just like anybody else, if somebody is doing something nefarious, you got to say, do they have a track record of doing that? You always got to look for the track record. And once you see Matthew's fingerprints here, you will understand exactly what he is doing with the Easter timeline. We'll start right at the very beginning. Matthew chapter 1, the genealogy. Matthew opens with a beautifully structured genealogy of Jesus, dividing history into 3 neat symmetrical groups of 14 generations. So he starts with Abraham and he goes all the way from there to the exile to Babylon, and then from the exile to Babylon to Jesus. Okay. I missed one there. David, yeah. From Abraham to David, and then from David to the exile, then from the exile to Jesus. And then he says in verse 17, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14, from David to the exile 14, and from the carrying away the Babylon to Christ 14. The problem is, if you count it yourself, the last group of 14 is not even 14, it's 13. Whoops, he missed it there. He doctored the genealogy to make this work. If you compare this genealogy with what we have in the quote-unquote Old Testament, it's not consistent. It's not. He doctored the text to make 14, 14, and 14. You compare this with Luke, we have 14 generations difference. Luke has 14 more generations than Matthew. Say, what's up with Matthew here in Matthew chapter 1 and the whole 14 thing? What's up with that? So he divided it into 14s, and the last one is not even 14, and he skipped 14 generations according to Luke. 14, 14, 14, 14. Why would he do that? Well, you see, 14 is the number of David. And David, the Messiah, is called the son of David. So it is very possible, if not very probable, that Matthew did this as a Haggadah. He doctored the text, he made up this neat little 14, 14, and 14, and subtracting 14 from the actual truth, because he wants to emphasize that number 14, because he wants to portray Jesus as the Messiah. Now, I personally believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But we need to understand that what Matthew's doing here, he's doctoring the text. 14 from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile, 14 from the exile to the Messiah. Although it's really 13 if you count it. It's poetic, it's dramatic. It points perfectly to Jesus as the culmination of Jewish history. But is it historical? Is it historic? No, not even close. If you hold Matthew's genealogy against the historical records, you will immediately see what Matthew did. He intentionally deleted several kings from the royal line: Ahaziah, Joash, Amaziah, Eliakim, as completely scrubbed them from the record. Why? Because if he included them, his perfect mathematical symmetry of 14 generations would be destroyed. And therefore, he couldn't use this 14, 14, 14, and minus 14 to prove that Jesus is the 14th son of David. That Jesus carries the gematria, if you will, of David, the numerical equivalent of the Messiah. Furthermore, if you compare Matthew's list to Luke's, we have everything from King David to Jesus is different. Matthew has 28 generations. Luke has 42. Some people say, oh, but Luke, and they quote somebody, people made up stories about, Luke is Mary, and the Gospel of Matthew is Joseph's line. Well, there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, Luke says Joseph, doesn't say Mary. Number two, Luke has 14 more generations. Do you actually believe that Joseph is 14 generations older than Mary? Number three, some people say, oh yeah, but it's the ancient way of doing things. They name the husband, but they really mean the wife. There's no evidence to support that. Zero. He just made that up. He made that up to make it work. So Matthew doesn't agree with Luke. Matthew doesn't agree with Chronicles. Matthew is not giving us a pristine, literal, historical birth record. He is giving us a theological construct. He is writing a Haggadah, just like that little engine that could, little train that could. He is shaping the data to create a dramatic, persuasive presentation of Jesus as the Son of David. He alters the historical record to make his point. Let's talk about another one. So, did you know that the Sermon on the Mount is not found in any of the other Gospels? The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, containing some of the most famous paramount teachings of Jesus, the Beatitudes, the Lord's Prayer, the Golden Rule. Matthew presents this as one single epic sermon delivered by Jesus on the mountainside to massive crowds. But here is where good scholarship comes in. If Jesus actually stood on a mountain delivering the greatest, most comprehensive ethical sermon of his entire ministry in the entire history of the world in one sitting, that would be a monumental historical event. So why is it completely missing from the other Gospels in this particular format? Mark doesn't have the Sermon on the Mount. Luke doesn't have the Sermon on the Mount. He has much shorter so-called Sermon on the Plain kind of teachings. But the rest of the material from Matthew's great sermon is fractured and scattered all over Luke's Gospel. So it's like Matthew gathers all of the teachings of Jesus, puts them all together, and makes up a story of Jesus preaching it all together in one sermon, in one sitting on the so-called Sermon on the Mount. In Luke, these teachings are spoken by Jesus in different towns, different houses, over a period of months or years. What is the logical conclusion here? Some people say, well, it's both true. Both true. By the way, folks, share the live stream. Share. Let's get get some more people on board. Any Christians, even I don't care, Christians or anybody, even atheists or agnostics that would be interested in learning this stuff. Share the live stream, share the video, folks. Some people say, oh, Jesus did both. Okay, so he did the Sermon on the Mount and he preached everything all in that setting, and then he also preached the same things in other settings. So they make Luke and Matthew and Mark all true in that sense. There's a problem with that. Matthew was written independently from the other ones. The author of Matthew wrote it to a specific audience at a specific time in a specific culture. Same with Luke. Luke only wrote that originally to Theophilus, is what he said in Luke chapter 1. It's only really supposed to be for one man. It's an account from man to man, not from man to world. Mark, again, he wrote in a very specific way. He wrote in a different style to a different audience in a different place. Did you know that each one of these Gospels were not put together? They were all in circulation separately. They existed as separate books. There was no New Testament as we know it in the first century. For decades, there was no New Testament. They did not compile these books together. For centuries, there was no 27-book New Testament. As far as we can understand, the first record that we have is in the 4th century. Say, so what do you mean, Christopher? What's your point? My point is this. A lot of people only had the Gospel of Matthew. A lot of people only had the Gospel of Luke. A lot of people only had the Gospel of Mark. If you had the Gospel of Mark, Jesus didn't preach the Sermon on the Mount. If you had the Gospel of Luke, Jesus didn't preach the Sermon on the Mount. That's the Sermon on the Mount, as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, just didn't happen. If you had the Gospel of Matthew, only the Gospel of Matthew, then, as many people did, then you'd only know it as one sermon that was preached one time on the mountain, not elsewhere. That means that these Gospels are not entirely forthwith. They're not entirely accurate. Because if you only get half of the story, if you only get half of the truth, is that the truth? If you only get half of the story, is that really all the story? Is that an accurate story? If someone, you ask John what happened at the dance last night, he only gives you half the story. Is that accurate? If your speedometer only gives you half of the speed, is that an accurate speedometer? Somebody is not being accurate here, historically speaking. It's either Matthew or Luke, Mark, or all the above, or two of the three. Somebody's not. The evidence points to the fact that Jesus probably did not preach the Sermon on the Mountain as one single event. How could you say that, Christopher? Because the Sermon on the Mountain is considered to be the greatest sermon ever. It's considered to be the greatest of all sermons of... Sorry, I just saw Cubert's comment here. I told the cop only half my odometer was. I only saw the number 1. I didn't see the 56 after that. You know, it only showed me the first only the first digit. Ossifer, I was only going 1 mile an hour, not 156. What are you talking about? And then Cubert says, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Cubers, welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. Yeah, so, very good. Thank you, Cubert. It's very good. Yeah. If you only got half the story, you can't say you got it's complete, of course. I mean, this is pretty simple, but if you only got half the story, is it accurate? You need to know more. So the Sermon on the Mountain, if it really did happen historically, what happened with Mark? Mark forgot about it? Luke forgot about it. John forgot about it. Paul forgot about it. James, everybody. Nobody thought it was important. The greatest sermon ever. Forgotten by these authors. I can still hear some Nimnu in the background going, "Oh, but we have it in the Gospel of Matthew. That's all that counts." Did you not just hear what I just said? The Gospel of Matthew was not written to be in the New Testament. It was written by at least one author to one specific demographic in a specific time, in a specific decade, not to everyone. So there were people who only had the Gospel of Matthew. And these Gospels were written decades apart. You look at Mark to John, for example. Most scholars and historians would tell you there are at least 25, 30 years or more between those Gospels. And they weren't all compiled together and printed as the New Testament until much, 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 much later. Many decades, perhaps centuries later. So what's Matthew doing here? 3 days and 3 nights. We're in the midst of that right now, according to the Christian calendar. 3 days and 3 nights. This is Shabbat. This is the day when Jesus rested in the tomb, if you will. Why didn't Matthew say 3 days and 3 nights, but no other author said 3 nights? It seems that Matthew is acting as an editor and a theologian, collecting all of these facts, and he presents them in modules, if you will, and he adds emphasis. He adds to the story for emphasis. The Sermon on the Mount. So again, Matthew is acting as an editor and a theologian, collecting a bunch of separate sayings of Jesus and artificially stitched them together into one massive dramatic super sermon. And not only that, but he put it on a mountain. Why would he do that? Why did he set it up on a mountain? Perhaps Matthew is presenting Jesus as the new Moses. Maybe that's part of his Haggadah. That's part of his story. Moses went up the mountain to receive the Torah. Jesus goes up the mountain to deliver the greatest historical sermon ever in history. But did it historically happen? Most likely not. At least not in that setting, in that format. Matthew put it all together and put it on a mountain. So most of the stuff that Jesus taught on the Sermon on the Mount, according to Matthew, is found in the other Gospels, but just not on the mountain, and not all together in one sermon. And likewise, all of the other Gospels having these teachings scattered throughout the years that Jesus was teaching and preaching and traveling, that's not in that format in Matthew either. So it seems like it's very, very likely that Matthew is doctoring the presentation of the historical events. Why? To heighten the theological drama. He edits, he amplifies, he constructs, he stitches it together. He puts it all together to make the truth bomb even greater, right? Put all these ingredients together and boom! This is what Matthew tends to do all the way through his gospel. Amplifies the actual story. Embellishes. And this tendency of Matthew to amplify the text becomes glaringly obvious when we look at a very specific quirk that he has, and that is the doubling motif. The doubling motif. Seek the Lord says, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, seek the Lord, welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. All right, so let's look at the doubling motif. How Matthew operates. If You might say, Christopher, why talk about this? What is this all about? Well, we're going to boil it up. We're going to distill it all down to here, folks. Why did he it's almost like he doubled it up here at 3 days and 3 nights. No other gospel has this 3 nights in there. No other gospel. Only Matthew. Only Matthew. When you read the Gospel of Mark, which almost all scholars agree that it's the first gospel that was ever written about a decade before Matthew, Jesus is leaving Jericho, and he heals a blind man, one blind man named Bartimaeus. Just one man. But Matthew copies that exact same story. And suddenly there's 2 blind men. When Mark records Jesus casting a legion of demons into the herd of pigs in the region of the Gerasenes, there is 1 demon-possessed man. When Matthew rewrites that story, edited, rewrites that story, suddenly there are 2 of them. Do we see a pattern? And it gets even more conspicuous when we look at the triumphal entry on Palm Sunday. In Mark and Luke, Jesus tells his disciples to go into a village and untie a colt that has never been ridden. They bring the colt, throw their cloaks on it, and Jesus rides into Jerusalem. Okay? But Matthew does Matthew here again. Matthew wants to explicitly connect this event to a prophecy in Zechariah 9:9, which says the king comes riding on a donkey, and a colt, the foal of a donkey. Now, in Hebrew poetry, that is simply parallelism, saying the same thing twice for emphasis. We see this a lot throughout the scriptures, especially in the Tanakh, especially in the Old Testament. Check out the whole book of Psalms, for example. Lots of repeat. It says, you know how today in most English music we rhyme words, the phonetic sounding of words. Oh, look at those! Hear these words. Look at those birds. So we rhyme the sound of the word spoken, but in the ancient Hebrew text, it's rhyming the actual meaning instead of the sound. It's actually much better, right? I mean, the meaning of words is really what counts more than just how you say it. So this is a thing when it comes to the law and the prophets. We often get this repetition. The donkey and the colt are the same animal. It's just repeated in just a slightly different way, and this is the way of writing back in ancient times, especially from these Jewish prophets. But Matthew literally writes that the disciples brought a donkey and a colt and put their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on both of them. Matthew alters the historical scene to create a hyper-literal fulfillment of prophecy. He doctors the text again. He multiplies it up. Where we have 1 in the other Gospels, Matthew puts 2. We see this heavily in the crucifixion as well, the resurrection narrative. We spoke a little bit about this last night. Matthew adds the tremendous amount of drama, highly theological material. He adds to Mark's account. It's only in the Gospel of Matthew that Pilate washes his hands in front of the crowd. That's completely absent from every other source, every other gospel in the Bible. It is only in Matthew that Pilate's wife suffers from insomnia and has a terrifying dream about Jesus. sending a message to her husband on the judgment seat. Would you say that's a little bit of drama added there? That's a Matthean addition. When it comes to the tomb, Matthew adds the Roman guards. None of the other Gospels know anything about Pilate posting a guard unit at the tomb. And on Sunday morning, Mark just says the women found the stone rolled away. But Matthew, what does Matthew do to the story? Matthew adds a massive dramatic earthquake and an angel of the Lord descending from heaven like lightning to physically roll the stone away and sit on it in front of the terrified guards. I'm bringing all of this up as these are evidence. This is evidence, point blank, text-to-text comparison that you can verify right now in your own Bibles. Matthew amplifies. Matthew adds to the text. Matthew Haggadahs, if you will. Matthew doctors the text to increase the drama and to explicitly force parallels with the Hebrew prophecies. So let's bring it back to the 3 days and 3 nights. In the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, let's go there. Verse 11, the Pharisees came out and began to question him, seeking from him a sign from heaven and testing him. He sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Most certainly I tell you, no sign will be given to this generation." He left them and again entering into the boat, departed to the other side. Look at this, folks. Look at this. This is amazing. It says nothing about Jonah. Nothing. Nada. Zilch. Zip. Do you understand the implications here? Think about this. We get in a time machine. We go back to the first century. We meet thousands of quote-unquote believers or people from the way, Christians, whatever you want to call them. And you say, well, Jesus said that as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the fish, in the belly of the fish, these people will go, what? Jesus didn't say that. Why would they say that? Because they would only have this. Jesus didn't say that here. It's not here. Jesus, and by the way, a little bit of a side note, you want to write this, for those of you who are on a little bit old school, if you have the hard copy of the Bible and you have a little bit of handwritten notes in the margin, write this in here. Mark chapter 8, verses 11 to 13. Jesus refused to give them a sign. No sign will be given to this generation. Just simply no sign. And then he left. Turn around, boom, gone. That's it. Nothing more. That's it. Compare that with the entire Gospel of John. The entire Gospel of John is the antithesis of this. The entire Gospel of John is Jesus going around loudly proclaiming who he is, wanting everyone to see the signs. These signs are so that you can believe. If you don't believe just because of what I say, believe because of the miracles. This is what Jesus said in the Gospel of John. It's like the opposite to what this says. I'm about to say it's a contradiction, but at least a borderline contradiction. Most certainly, I tell you, no sign will be given to this generation. No sign. But in the Gospel of John, we have Jesus going around constantly calling attention to himself and calling attention to the signs, saying, look at what I'm doing. Believe just if for no other reason, believe because of the signs because of the signs, because of the miracles. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is very quiet. He is the lamb led to the slaughter. He says next to nothing. He doesn't want anybody to know. Somebody might say, oh, but this is this is just, oh, well, Mark is just showing one side of Jesus, and John is showing the other side of Jesus. Nice try. If you go to your public library and you pick up 2 books on Abraham Lincoln, and one book, Abraham Lincoln, is super quiet. He doesn't say much at all. He's very, very, very shy. He doesn't want anybody to, he doesn't want much. He doesn't want attention. And what he does and all the great things he doesn't want anybody to know it. But the other book says that Abraham Lincoln was constantly, publicly proclaiming his works, and he wanted to be seen, and he wanted everybody to know what he was doing, and he wanted everybody to hear. Wouldn't you say there's a contradiction? Of course you would. Anybody in their right mind would say, yeah, okay, one book, which one is right? This is what we have in the Gospel of Mark. You know what? Just before I did the live stream here, I was going through some of the comments. Earlier today, I was going through some of the comments, and people call me all kinds of names, even though they agree to be respectful and not to personally attack myself or anybody else for that matter. But if they disagree with what I say, to present the evidence that supports their claim. They all agree to that. They tap or they click on got it, like it's an agreement. It's a covenant that you make with this channel. But then people go around like basically calling me Satan or whatever, or saying this is Satan's work, whatever. Just calling names, just stoking the flames of fear does not prove me wrong. At the end of the day, the question is it true? And if it's true, you must face the truth if indeed you serve the God of truth. And if you have a problem with the truth, then maybe you're not on the God of truth's side. Maybe you're on the other side, accusing everybody else of being on the side that you're actually on. Because, as it's famously said, that the devil is a liar. There's no truth in him. Do we not want the truth? And if I say something that's not true, please let me know. I mean, seriously, say, Christopher, give me a timestamp. At this timestamp, you said this, and that is not true, Christopher. And this is the evidence to support it. This is the evidence to support my claim that what you said is not true. If you do that, please, I'll be grateful for that, because I want every single word to be as true could be. And I'm telling you the truth. In Mark, Jesus is the low-key human. He's not. You don't see much divinity in the Gospel of Mark. Truth. Compare it with the Gospel of John. You don't see much divinity in the Gospel of Mark. He is the low-key human, doesn't want to be seen, doesn't want to be known. Don't tell anybody what I did. Don't tell anybody that I healed you. Don't tell anybody about these miracles. He's at the trial. He's quiet, and Pilate is shocked. Well, how can you not say anything for yourself? In the Gospel of John, the total opposite. We want the truth. Is that not the truth, what I just said? So here, the Pharisees asked Jesus for a sign. Jesus sighs deeply and says, why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it. Period. No sign will be given to this generation. Full stop. Period. End of story. Over, finished, done, gone, out. And he leaves. Wicked generation seeks for a sign. So the Gospel of Luke adds a little bit. Now we know Luke comes around, a good decade plus after Mark. So the Gospel of Luke adds, as I understand, it does have the whole thing about Jonah in here. So Luke is not a first-hand witness. According to Luke chapter 1, he says himself that many people have undertaken this kind of thing, is to write about what Jesus did, basically, the things. So Luke, when he says, like, many people wrote about it, well, you know what? Let's go over there and take a look at this first. Again, I want to be super precise here and make sure that what I'm saying is absolutely factual. So Luke chapter 1, verse 1, it says, and I quote, since many have undertaken to set in order a narrative concerning those matters which have been fulfilled among us. Okay, so that's talking about what, Jesus, the life of Jesus, what Jesus did and all that kind of stuff, who Jesus was. That's what he said. So he says many have already written about this stuff. So Luke knew about many other writings, and he probably had those writings at hand. So he probably had Mark, perhaps Matthew, plus many others that we probably don't even know, we don't have right now, right? Perhaps even the Gospel of Thomas. You might say, oh, the Gospel of Thomas. Yeah, perhaps, because most of the Gospel of Thomas, well, let me put it this way, at least a good third, maybe I shouldn't say most, but at least a good third of the Gospel of Thomas, as I understand it, is also in the Gospels, the canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So whatever the case is, Luke said for himself, many. So he's already got a library that he's drawing from. He's not an eyewitness, so he can't say, I saw this, no, he didn't say that at all. In the Gospel, or in the book of Acts, the next book that he wrote, half of the book of Acts he did not witness. The other half he claims to witness because he uses that first person, I, me, us, we went here, this kind of stuff. Before that, he didn't use that kind of terminology at all. Okay. So Luke may have Matthew in front of him or some other kind of source that he has. And so Luke chapter 11, verse 29, when the multitudes were gathered together to him, he began to say, this is an evil generation that seeks after a sign. No sign will be given to it but the sign of Jonah the prophet. For even as Jonah became a sign to the Ninevites, so the Son of Man will also be to this generation. And that's it. A little bit later he says, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, behold, one greater than Jonah is here. Okay, so that's it. Where does it say 3 days or 3 nights? So in Luke, it just says sign of Jonah. So Luke adds to Mark, probably because of other sources that he has, and just says, quote unquote, sign of Jonah, whatever that means. It could mean anything. I know that we're already programmed to see or to hear something in the text that's not there, like an audio illusion. I call it dogmadolia, the pareidolia, where people see things that are not there because they already have something pre-programmed in their mind. So they look into the clouds. Oh, look, there's a lion. There's a lion. That means Lion of the tribe of Judah. Or they look into water and they see it's almost like an acid trip. They see things that are not there. Pareidolia. But you know what happens? People read the Bible through their dogma. So it's almost like pareidolia in a scriptural sense. I call it dogmadolia. Dogmadolia. They see things that are not there because they're reading it through the lens of pre-programmed doctrine. It's a very difficult thing to overcome, but I pray every one of us overcomes it because we want to read the text for what it really is, right? Let's be healed of dogmadolia. So, Chipmunk says, I like that word, dogmadolia. Thank you, Chipmunk. In Luke, the sign of Jonah is simply a sign of preaching and repentance. Some people would say that that's what the sign of Jonah is. Because after all, that is what people saw. That is what made them repent. That is what what can a sign be a sign if they don't see it? I'll finish up here with Luke and this thought here, and then I'll jump in the live chat with you guys. See, Matthew chapter 12 adds he adds to Mark, he adds to maybe I shouldn't say adds to Luke, because this point in time Luke was probably not written, but in Matthew chapter 12, this is where we get the 3 days and 3 nights. And so many people hang their hats on. So many people just absolutely would die for this, and they don't understand what Matthew's doing here. As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the huge fish. So he adds a hyper-specific caveat here. As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So, do you see what happened here? Matthew took the phrase, sign of Jonah, if you will, and he injected 3 days and 3 nights to create a spectacular prophetic parallel. The problem is, by doing so, he broke the actual historical timeline if you take this literally. If you understand, I understand Matthew. Yeah, Matthew's just being Matthew. It's a Haggadah. He's just embellishing here. If you understand that, that's great. That's fine. That's beautiful. Kosher. Everything's cool. But if you read it as if it's a literal historical event, that's where things go wrong. The addition of the quote-unquote 3 nights is a Matthean theological construct, not a historical stopwatch. Historically, we have to understand how the ancient Jewish world reckoned time. So that's the question here. We know that 3 nights have been added, or at least we can say that we have a high degree of probability that this is what happened, because Matthew does this all the way through his gospel. So cut out the 3 nights. Look at the 3 days. How can Jesus be 3 days in the tomb? We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's see what we have here in the live chat. Heather says, hi, everyone. Hello, Heather. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. Hope all is well. Heather says, wow, wicked generation for a sign. Strong words. I like that. Wow, yes. Thank you, Heather. And Cubert says, I guess people don't pay attention when God says it's terrible to slander people, especially men and women of God. Yes, exactly. It's really out of control, Cuberts. There are some people, and I don't want to name names myself here, but I know you guys have run across people like this. We got like high-profile individuals, so-called Christian teachers, leaders, influencers, and it's like they build their entire ministry on slandering other believers. Oh, so-and-so is a false prophet. Oh, so-and-so is a false teacher. Oh, so-and-so is this and that and everything else. Calling them names. So I'm all for saying, okay, so-and-so said this, and this is wrong, and this is the evidence to prove it. I'm all for that. But to attack a person and call them names and to character assassination is what it is. We need to draw a line between attacking a person's argument and actually attacking a person's character. Thank you, Cuberts. Heather says, off subject, but maybe another time you can tell me what the definition of dogma is. Thank you. Yeah, we can do that now, Heather. Yeah, so dogma is like it's like a boiled down version of the doctrine of a church, like the talking points. Usually when it comes, let's say, for example, in the Protestant tradition, the talking points would be something like the Roman road of salvation. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and nobody's good enough, and you're born a sinner, and so you need Jesus right from birth, and you need to be baptized, whatever the case is. Then we have the statement of faith, or the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, that kind of stuff. Dogma, and it can expand into other other topics and subjects, such as Bible prophecy. A lot of people have this dogma about Bible like this is what must have, like this is what the Bible says, and we will not believe anything other than this. The rapture will happen, then the 7 years tribulation, then there's the millennial reign of Christ, and we're still waiting for all this stuff, and all that kind of stuff. When a person locks down on that, and they become too entrenched in the doctrine, that's what I call dogma. And like, if you talk to somebody about some of the stuff we say here, you'll get a lot of dogma. Usually you'll get people saying, oh yeah, but you say the sinner's prayer, you'll be saved. Basically, it's a condensed version of what they believe the story of Jesus, the purpose of the law, the purpose of Jesus, and the way of salvation is. And they clamp down on it really, like they're like almost like what do you call some of these animals, like a snapping turtle, for example, that grabs onto something, won't let it go. It won't let it go. So that's when someone gets really dogmatic, and they start, using the points that they have learned in church or from their favorite Christian leaders. That is basically talking points, the basics of their faith and what they believe. And most times, there's no historical evidence to support what they're saying. It's just dogma. Heather says, okay, so I was raised Baptist, so it's what Baptists say is right, and so that's their dogma. Yeah. So I did spend some time in a Baptist church myself. So I do have a taste of the Baptist way of things. So I've been there. They can be very dogmatic, and a lot of Baptists are. I don't want to throw a blanket on everybody that's Baptist. I'm sure there are some that are not so dogmatic, but there are a lot of Baptists that are, especially when it comes to the way of salvation according to what they believe. Like, here's the statement of faith. Go home and memorize this and confess this, and you're all good. And anybody who says anything against it is a heretic, false teacher, false prophet, and you can condemn them as such. So that's dogmatic. Heather says, I understand. Thank you for breaking it down for me. Thank you for your question. Thank you for asking. A lot of people, and I'm not just Baptists, but others as well. I think that it's more in the Protestant corner of Christianity than in Orthodox or in Roman Catholic. But a lot of people, what they do is they idolize their dogma. To them, their dogma is God. If you speak against my belief, if you speak against, quote unquote, what the Bible says, what they mean by that is how I interpret it, how I was taught what it means, my dogma. If you speak against that, then you are speaking against God. So they put their dogma up on a pedestal and they worship it. This is what I call dogmolatry. They idolize their dogma as if their dogma itself. It's like, what's God's will for your life? Here, just believe the statement of faith. Here's the statement of faith. Just believe this, and you're all good. Believe this, say the sinner's prayer, you're fine. like that's God, like bow down to this statement of faith. That's what I call dogmolatry. Thank you, Heather. Okay. I am live on multiple different platforms here all at once. Lane over on TikTok, are you still there? Lane, calling Lane. Yeah, so I am on multiple platforms all at once here today. I will be focusing primarily on YouTube live chat. YouTube live chat is a members only live chat, so we'll be focusing primarily on that. Okay, so let's just assume that Luke is right, accurate. I do believe that Luke is more historical than Matthew on most counts. Does that mean Luke is perfect? No, I don't think he's perfect in what he says, but I think he's more historical. So Luke says the sign of the prophet Jonah, and that's all he says, right? Yeah, there's nothing other than that. So he doesn't define what the sign of the prophet Jonah is. So what do you guys think in the live chat? Let's just kind of step back from the whole idea that the sign of the prophet Jonah is certainly him in the belly of the fish. Let's just step back from that. So a sign is a sign, right? It's something for all to see. It's something to direct you, right? That's what a sign is for. Along your journey, you see a sign. So in Jonah's ministry, what was the sign? What if it wasn't the fish? What if, because after all, who actually witnessed that? And who could, is there any evidence that it was witnessed and confirmed and used as a sign to amongst all the Ninevites? Am I saying that's not it? I'm not saying that's not it. I'm just thinking out loud. Let's just do some reverse engineering here. So what if the sign of Jonah was actually his preaching? He goes into Nineveh. He traverses Nineveh. He preaches, repent, because God's going to destroy the city. What if that's the sign? And what if that's what Yeshua meant when he said, that's the sign that you'll be given? That's the only sign you're going to get, folks, the sign of Jonah. Because remember, I do believe it's also in Luke, right, where he said, I don't come for the sinner, or I don't come for the righteous, I come for the sinners to call them to repentance. Think about this for a moment. And I never thought about this until just now, folks. I never thought about this. It's just coming to me right now. Hot off the press of the mind of Christopher here. Okay, so if Jonah in the belly of the fish, and he was there for 3 days, whatever the case, and then he was spit out, and then he goes, and if that's the sign, he goes and preaches afterwards. If that's the sign, if the whole 3 days in the belly of the fish is a sign, and if that's the sign that caused all of the Ninevites to repent, then how do you parallel that with Jesus being in the tomb? Because if he's in the tomb for 3 days, and then he comes out, does that mean the whole entire city's saved? Does the entire city, whatever city, Jerusalem or any other city, get saved because of Jesus' resurrection? Do we have half of a city getting saved immediately after Jesus' resurrection because of that sign, if it was the sign? So, if the sign is Jesus spending 3 days in the tomb, we must ask a question: how can you get 3 days out of Friday to Sunday? If he rose on Sunday morning and he died on Friday afternoon, how is that 3 whole days? Right? Here's the thing. So we have to go back again in the history and in the culture. Back in the ancient in the ancient Near East, they did not use a 24-hour atomic clock like we do here in the West. They did not think in the lines of 24 hours like this. According to the ancient Jewish viewpoint, a day and a night constituted a period called an ona. Ona. And any part of an ona was counted as a whole ona. I think that's worth repeating. According to the ancient Jewish viewpoint, a day and a night constituted a period called an ona. Any part of an ona was counted as a whole ona. How do we know this? And where's my evidence? I need to practice what I preach here. Where's my evidence to support this? Well, we have to look into ancient Jewish writings to get this. The Talmud is full of this kind of reckoning, of this kind of math. Any fraction of a day is legally and chronologically counted as an entire day. Some Christians think that the Talmud is taboo. We should not even, go there. Well, it really is a treasure trove of information that we can learn from. It shows us how ancient Jews thought, how they calculated days. In the book of Acts, we read about the Sabbath day's journey. Well, it doesn't tell us what a Sabbath day's journey is. Nowhere in the canonical Bible does it tell us what the Sabbath day's journey is. But in the Talmud, it does. So, did you know that you need the Talmud in order to fully understand your Bible? According to the Talmud, any fraction of a day is legally and chronologically counted as an entire day. So, let's look at the timeline. Jesus is crucified on Friday afternoon. Before sundown, that fraction of daylight counts as day 1. At sundown, Friday night begins, crossing into Saturday. That Sabbath day, is what we're on right now, is day 2. At sundown on Saturday, the first day of the week begins. Sunday dawn is day 3. Jesus rose on the 3rd day. This fits perfectly with the inclusive timeline and the timekeeping of the 1st century in the ancient Jewish view. You have 3 parts, or I should say you have parts of 3 days. Part of day 1, the whole of day 2, and part of day 3 counted legally as 3 whole days. But what you do not have and what you cannot force without destroying the narrative is 3 literal nights. You only have Friday night and Saturday night. The quote-unquote 3 days and 3 nights is a brilliant piece of literary theology by Matthew. But it is an addition, and it is not historical. Matthew was just Matthewing there. Now, if you think Matthew altering the details of this whole narrative, if that's shocking to you, think about the Gospel of John, for example. The Gospel of John does not just add a few dramatic flourishes. John alters the entire timeline of the crucifixion. This is a massive issue with biblical scholarship, and it is something that makes it extremely clear that John is a theological document, not a historical logbook. The timeline in John does not fit the timeline of Matthew, does not fit the timeline of Mark, does not fit the timeline of Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called synoptic gospels. Literally, it means it's like a synchronized sync, if you will. Optic meaning to see, right? Synoptic literally means to view side by side. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you can put them up side by side. You can compare them because they record, for the most part, they record the same events. So you can easily compare the three. But John, you can't, because John, 90 some odd percent of John is not found in any other gospel. So it's not something you can just put up against Matthew and Luke, except perhaps, the trial, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. That kind of stuff you can, but not most of the other content in John you cannot put up against any of the other gospels. In the Synoptics, the Last Supper is explicitly a Passover meal. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus eats the Passover meal. Thursday evening, the Passover lamb has already been slaughtered. Jesus and his disciples eat the Passover. He institutes the communion elements, if you will, which is really just the Passover, but he links it to himself. Then he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. He is arrested. He is crucified on Friday. But John completely changes this. Just like Matthew, am I saying that John is lying? No. John is probably doing what Matthew did, just in a different way. Maybe even on, to the max, turn it up to 11. John completely changes the timeline. In John chapter 18 and 19, Jesus does not eat the Passover meal. In John's gospel, Jesus is arrested, put on trial, and stands before Pilate on the day of preparation for the Passover. John chapter 19, we read this last night, and it says right here, verse 14, now it was the preparation day of the Passover at about the 6th hour. In John's gospel, Jesus is being nailed to the cross at the exact hour that the Passover lambs are being slaughtered in the temple courts. John moved the day of the crucifixion so that Jesus dies as the ultimate Passover lamb. It's brilliant. It's brilliant theology. It's just not history, if you will. It's brilliant imagery. It's just not historical. He either ate the Passover or he didn't. He either ate the Passover or he died before the Passover. And again, this creates a massive ripple effect regarding the Sabbath. In the Synoptics, Jesus is taken down from the cross specifically because the weekly Sabbath, the Saturday, is about to begin. The women go home and, as Luke says, they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. It is a profound picture of Torah observance. Did Jesus teach that you don't have to obey Torah anymore? No, of course not, or else they wouldn't be doing this. Jesus taught Torah observance. But John alters this entirely because John moved the crucifixion back a whole day, making Jesus the Passover lamb, if you will, or linking him with that whole idea. The impending Sabbath is no longer just a weekly Sabbath. John 19, and we go down to verse 31, it says, therefore the Jews, because it was preparation day, so that the bodies wouldn't remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was a special one, asked of Pilate that their legs might be broken, that they might be taken away. So John puts it like it could be just another a high Sabbath, not necessarily the weekly Sabbath. A high Sabbath that was part of the the first day of Passover is supposed to be a Sabbath, because the weekly Sabbath happened to coincide with the first day of unleavened bread. So in John's timeline, he breaks the organic historical flow of the Sabbath rest that we see in the Synoptics. Now, I know exactly what the apologists say here. I can, you hear it all the time. People say, but there's no contradiction. John was just using a different calendar. He was using the Essene, or the solar calendar, or the Galilean calendar, or the whatever the case. They're making up all kinds of stuff. And the Pharisees used the Judean calendar. This is an apologetic invention. Look at the text in John chapter 18, verse 28. It says, "They led Jesus, therefore, from Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was early, and they themselves didn't enter the praetorium, that they might not be defiled, but might eat the Passover." The Jewish leaders take Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. But John adds that they wanted to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, that they didn't enter into the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. The Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, the Sanhedrin, the high priest, they are all refusing to enter Pilate's praetorium to avoid defilement. Why? So that they can eat the official Passover meal that evening. You do not worry about official national temple defilement for an unofficial rogue Essene calendar. It doesn't work. That one verse destroys the argument that, they're using a different calendar. The calendar John is referencing is the official Jerusalem temple calendar. John intentionally has Jesus dying before the official Jewish authorities eat the Passover. There's no secret second calendar. It's amazing how many Christians shoehorn things into the text that's just simply not there. Dogmadolia. John deliberately changed the date of the crucifixion to make the theological point that Jesus is the Lamb of God, who takes away the sins of the world. By the way, John is the only one who says that. In the baptism where Jesus goes to John the Baptist to get baptized, John says, "Behold, the Son of God who takes away the sin of the world." That's only found in the Gospel of John. The whole idea of Jesus being the Lamb is only John. Probably influenced or sparked by Paul, because John was written long after Paul. It's at least possible that he was very influenced by the writings of Paul. And I don't believe it's the apostle, one of the 12 John either. It's incredibly important that we are honest with the text. We cannot force these accounts to perfectly harmonize as literal history, because the authors didn't intend them to be literal history. Many parts of Matthew was not intended to be literal history. John, many more parts of John was not intended to be literal history. Now, Luke, for example, it's more intended to be literal history. Mark, yeah. Maybe not as much as Luke, but certainly there's literal history in there. It boils down to literal versus figurative. We have a huge problem when Christians read, Christian leaders, I don't care where you are on the ladder, where you are on the totem pole, doesn't matter to me. If you read John literally, you need to reassess. There are a few parts, vaguely speaking, it is literal, like it was Jesus literally did exist and he was crucified and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, for sure. But when you read John in the same way that you read the Torah, when you read John in the same way that you read the Epistle of James, then you run into a big problem. When you read a text, you need to, first of all, find out how it is written. What's the mindset of the author? Recognizing that it's okay to write something that's not literal history for the purpose of expressing a theological concept or for emphasis, that actually frees us. Recognizing this fact frees us. recognizing that Matthew adds a lot of stuff to the story, makes us free. We don't have to try to make it work. You can easily say, well, Matthew was just doing what ancient Jews did, ancient Haggadah. Same with John. It frees us from defending impossible timelines and making ourselves look like fools, saying, oh, but it's no contradiction. Anybody in their right mind would look at it and go, okay, right, buddy. Yeah. So this is your religion? Just denying, what's obvious, the obvious truth stares you right in the face and you deny it? Yeah. Quite the religion. But understanding where John is coming from, where Matthew is coming from, understanding when Matthew wrote Matthew 24, there's a lot of stuff that's added there that's not historical. And much of what Matthew builds on Mark. We know this. He builds on Mark, but adds a lot. He embellishes. John, he's on his own planet. Okay, John's got his own planet. He's not even part of the Synoptic Gospels. But it seems like he's doing the same thing. He's working off of a set of, dogma, I guess you could say. He's working off of a set of theological points that he's making here, and he's writing stories around it. He wants to prove that Jesus is the Passover lamb. So how does he do that? Well, Jesus dies when the Passover lambs die. So that links him with the Passover lambs. Did he really? No, but that's part of the story to link it so that to convey that concept. To understand this is so important, dear Christian brothers and sisters. Dear students of Scripture, Bible scholars, it frees us from trying to defend impossible contradictions, and it allows us to see what these authors were actually trying to tell us about the significance of the narrative that they're conveying. Understanding that theological intent brings us right to the burial of Jesus, which is another area where the Gospel of John heavily doctors the tradition. He creates a specific portrait of the Messiah. Let's go to the resurrection, and let's compare the resurrection here. Let's start with Mark. We'll do this in chronological order. We'll start with Mark, chronologically as it was written. Mark says, this is Mark chapter 16, verse 1. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that they might come and anoint him. Okay. Let's compare that with Matthew chapter 28. We'll do Matthew chapter 28, verse 1. Now after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. So Matthew did not mention Salome. And he did not mention anything about the spices. He did not mention anything about that they came to anoint him because they believed he was dead, and so they were going to. This is like part of like an embalming ritual to preserve the body. So Matthew skips over all of that. Luke chapter 24, verse 1. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came. Okay, who's they? We'll go to the previous chapter. Verse 55, the women who had come with him out of Galilee followed after him and saw the tomb and how the body was laid. They returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment. So here's the question. So who let's see. Do we have any evidence here in the Gospel of Luke? In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23, verse 56 or 55, the women who come with him out of Galilee followed after him. Who are these women? Where does it say this in Luke? Does it give us the names of these women? Let's have a look earlier here. Okay, the next chapter, actually, Luke chapter 24, verse 10. Now they were Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James. So that's what we have here for the women. John chapter 20, verse 1. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went early while it was still dark to the tomb and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. Okay, so we got a problem right here already. In Luke, so in John, it's just Mary Magdalene. In Luke, it's Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James. In Mark, it's Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome. So we got different names here to begin with. Okay, moving on. Mark chapter 16, verse 2, the very next verse. Very early on the first day of the week, so this would be Sunday morning, they came to the tomb while the sun had risen. Do we see any problems here? You see a problem already, folks? I do. Maureen, are you there on TikTok? Yeah, so Matthew says that these ladies, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome, came to anoint him. Mark says this. They came to anoint him, so they didn't expect a physical resurrection. Very early on the first day of the week, this would be Sunday morning, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. So this is after the sun rose. That's when they came. In Matthew, while the sun was rising, basically as it began to dawn. Okay, Luke, at early dawn. John, while it was still dark. You see? So John says these women came while it was still dark. Mark says they came when the sun had risen. John said Mary Magdalene came. So I know somebody might say, oh, but, they're both true. Mary came first, and then later on they all... You can make it up, but this is not what you get when you read the story. When you read John just as it really is, alone, as he wrote it as an individual book, he didn't write it to be complementary to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You get just one woman coming to the tomb, and it was still dark. All the other Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels, there were multiple women who came to the tomb and it was not dark. It was the sun had risen or beginning to dawn, as Matthew says. Mark chapter 13, verse 3. They were saying among themselves, who will roll away the stone from the door of the tomb for us? For it was very big. Verse 4, for it was very big. Looking up, they saw that the stone was rolled back. Okay, so they came. So they were worried that the stone, that they wouldn't be able to roll the stone away. It was too big for them. It was too heavy for them. But when they got there, it was already rolled back. Now, let's go to Luke. We'll save Matthew for after that. So Luke chapter 24, it says they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. So it's very much like Mark. This no drama here, no bombastic Hollywood scene of anything going on here. It's just they got there and oh, the stone's already rolled away. Okay, so good, So we don't have to worry about that now. The stone's rolled away. It's already rolled away. And in the Gospel of John, the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So again, it has been moved already. Doesn't say anything. It's like they didn't see anything. They didn't see anybody moving it, anything moving it. It was just already moved back when they got there. Now Matthew, being Matthew, look at what Matthew does to the story. Matthew chapter 28, verse 2, behold, there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from the sky and came and rolled away the stone from the door and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes was white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards shook, and they became as like dead men. The angel answered the women, "Don't be afraid." So there's this great drama story that Matthew has here. Lots of drama, lots of bombastic things going on here. So you read Matthew, and if you don't have Mark, if you don't have Luke, you don't have John, which a lot of people didn't, you would say that these women saw. First of all, there was an earthquake, another earthquake. We already had an earthquake just a couple days ago for the crucifixion. Now there's another earthquake. How many times in Matthew do we have earthquake? I'm going to do a search, folks. I'm going to see if I can find how many times in Matthew. Matthew 24, earthquakes. Matthew 27, earthquake happened. 2 days later after that, another earthquake. Matthew 28, another great earthquake. Behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. Right. So none of the other Gospels mention anything about that. When the women got to the tomb, the stone was already rolled away. They were glad they can enter the tomb now. Everything's all good. No drama, no spectacular events going on. But Matthew does Matthew. Matthew just Matthews it here and adds all of this spectacular Hollywood effects. In Mark, the first gospel that was written, it says in the next verse, entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were amazed. Okay, so it's pretty low key, all things considered, right? They walk into the tomb. Well, they got to the tomb. The stone's already rolled away. No fanfare going on here. No fireworks and earthquakes and all that kind of stuff. So they got to the tomb. The stone's rolled away. Oh, okay. So somebody got here before us and whatever. So they walk in. Oh, there's a man there. Okay. Luke chapter 24, verse 3, they entered in and did not find the Lord's body. So in Luke, there's no man either. There's nobody else there. While they were greatly perplexed about this, behold, two men stood by them in dazzling clothing. So apparently these two men, and most people would understand these are angels, just appeared or walked in behind them. And so when they first got there, there was nobody else there. You see how these stories are so different? Mark has got his own version of the story. Luke has got his own version. Matthew certainly got his own version of the story. And John, too, very, very different. And there are contradictions here, as we just already discovered. So Luke chapter 24, there's no... when they first got there, nobody else there, except just they didn't find the Lord's body. And then all of a sudden, these two men came behind them. Or stood by them. It says, stood by them, whatever that means. They could have walked in the tomb after or just supernaturally appeared. Whatever you want to believe there. John says, John chapter 20, verse 2. Whoa, look at this. They don't even go in. Mary Magdalene doesn't even go into the tomb. Therefore she ran. So she just saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. That's it. No going in, no appearance of angels, no angels sitting on the stone, no angel inside. The one angel according to, was it one angel according to Mark? Yeah. And two angels according to Luke. And maybe Luke is doing a little bit of a Matthew there too with the two. And John, there's no angels. Nothing. It's just the stone had been rolled away. And therefore she ran and came to Peter, Simon Peter, and said to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and said to them, they have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have laid him. That's a contradiction. Why do I say that? Well, let's read on in Mark. So in Mark, the man in the tomb said to them, don't be amazed. You seek Jesus, the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he goes before you into Galilee. There you will see him as he said to you. They went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had come on them. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Period. And by the way, the earliest manuscripts end there. That's the end of Mark. The original, earliest Mark that we know of, that's it. No record of resurrection appearances, no record of anything like that, no record of anything else. Just that's it. They meet an angel. The angel tells them what happened to Jesus. Jesus rose from the dead. Go and meet him in Galilee. That's it. Done. And it says they go. They were afraid, and they said nothing to anyone. That's it. That's it. End of story, according to some of the original manuscripts, or earliest manuscripts, I should say. In Luke, we have the two men standing by them, surprised. They were surprised by these two men. Becoming terrified, they bowed their faces down to the earth. So this is, again, a little bit extra here. The men said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? He isn't here, but is risen. Remember what he told you when he was still in Galilee, saying that the Son of Man must be delivered up into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. They remembered his words, returned from the tomb, and told all these things to the 11 and to the rest. Very different story. Very, very different. Wow. John. So John, it's a contradiction. They don't know what happened to the Lord here. They don't know what happened to Jesus. In John, there's no angel rolling the stone away from the door. There's no earthquake. There's no angel telling them what happened. They just look, they see the stone rolled away. The stone's already been rolled away. And they automatically assume that someone has come and taken the body. We don't know where they have laid him. No angel told them about the resurrection. They don't know what happened in John. That's a contradiction. Because in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they do know what happened. Because the angel or angels told them what happened. So I'll stop with the Gospel of Mark, because that's really all that we have in the ancient, some of the oldest text that we have in the Gospel of Mark ends at verse 8. But let's go to the Gospel of Matthew now. So in the Gospel of Matthew, wow, Matthew is being Matthew. So Matthew says, when they got to the tomb, behold, there was a great earthquake, and the angel of the Lord descended from the sky and came and rolled the stone from the door and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook. Are there no guards in any of the other Gospels? Are there any guards in any of the other Gospels? Those in the live chat, what do you think? Is there any guards? Or you can look it up. Is there any guards guarding the tomb in Mark, Luke, and John? Because we see it here in Matthew, and so far I don't remember reading about guards in Mark, in Luke, or John. Could this have been another Matthean addition, embellishment? You decide. Verse 5, the angel answered the women, "Don't be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus, who has been crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, just like he said. Come, see the place where the Lord was lying. Go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead, and behold, he goes before you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you." And then they depart quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to bring his disciples word. As they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, "Rejoice." So, of course, that's not in Mark, and at least not the original, earliest accounts of Mark. Luke 24, verse 10, now they were Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, mother of James, the other women with them told these things to the apostles. So in Luke, we don't have this either, where Jesus met them saying, "Rejoice." In John, of course, we don't have any of that at all. We just have them saying, "We don't know where they laid him." And then Peter goes toward the tomb, Peter and the other disciple, and they both run together, and the other disciple outran Peter, came to the tomb first, stooping and looking in. He saw the linen cloths laying there, didn't enter in. And then Peter followed him and entered into the tomb. He saw the linen clothes lying, and the cloth that had been on his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but rolled up in a place by itself. Cubert says no guards in Mark, Luke, or John. Thank you, Cuberts. Yes. Okay, thank you for confirming that. That is awesome. So that is only found only in Matthew. Right. So that's a you know what I'm thinking, right? Red flags everywhere here. Only in Matthew. Why wouldn't any of the other gospels record that? Because that's, I can remember, true story, folks. I can remember when I used to go out on the streets a lot and even go to school, into the schools, and preaching in every which way I can preach everywhere. I would tell the resurrection story as per Matthew. I would do that. I would use Matthew's account. Why? Well, it's quite spectacular, right? It certainly does add an element of drama there. It certainly does add this element of suspense and power to it. Here's what I'm thinking. If I used the Matthean account on the streets for power and impact, because it was so powerful to me, and it's so important to me in the way I used to think, it was so important that I use that. Why wouldn't Mark use that? Why wouldn't Luke use that? Why wouldn't John use that? Do they not think that's powerful? That an earthquake happened, and then another earthquake happened, and there were guards, and they shook for fear, and they were like amazed, and they all became believers. Oh, Jesus is alive, and all this kind of stuff going on. And by the way, folks, still running the campaign for raising enough funds to purchase some of the vintage equipment that we need to digitize some of these old videos. I have videos of these events that I preached at, and you could hear. I would love to do it. I would love to show you guys, put it up on YouTube, and do a reaction video to myself. I would say the same thing. I would say, well, look at I use Matthew's account, and I did quite frequently. I use Matthew's account of the resurrection. And by the way, if you're interested in seeing, watching those old videos from 34 years ago, 33, 32 years ago, if that's something that you'd like to help out with, the link is in the description on YouTube and on Facebook and on BitChute and on Rumble. The link is in the description to our Ko-fi, ko-fi page to raise funds for that. As soon as we get enough funds for purchasing that equipment, we'll do that, and I'll get that published ASAP. Those of you who contributed to the cause, any amount, you will get first row seats. I will publish that video privately, only for you guys to watch first, so you can give me some comments, feedback, whatever you suggestions, whatever you want to do, and then we'll, I certainly covet your feedback and your thoughts on that. And so I'm gonna post it for you guys first for the first month, and then after that we'll post it publicly, and I'll do a lot more reaction videos to those old videos. All right. Thank you guys again for those of you who have contributed already, and for those of you who are considering it. Thank you. So if Matthew's account is correct, the earthquakes, the angels, the appearance of lightning, Jesus met them right away, saying, "Rejoice." Why would they, in John, why would they say that they don't know what happened to him? Like, the body is gone. We don't know where they have laid him. So apparently in John chapter 20, verse 2, the women believed that someone stole the body. So the angels informed the women what happened to Jesus. They remembered his words. They returned from the tomb and told all these things to the 11 and to the rest. Now, they were, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, Joanna. These words seem senseless to them. These words seemed to them to be nonsense, and they didn't believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he departed to his home and wondered what had happened. Even Peter didn't know. Then there's the road to Emmaus story. And then later on, Jesus, road to Emmaus. So Jesus appears to those disciples on the road to Emmaus. And then at the end, Jesus appears to his disciples. And in the Gospel of Matthew, they meet Jesus on the way to the disciples. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go tell my brothers that they should go into Galilee, and there they will see me." The report of the guards, the Great Commission. So the 11 disciples went into Galilee in Matthew. In Luke, there's no mention of going to Galilee at all. Right? Other than just saying, remember what he told you while he was still in Galilee. No mention of Galilee here at all in Luke. Jesus commands the disciples to stay in Jerusalem. Right? So in Luke chapter 24, verse 49, wait in the city of Jerusalem until you are clothed with power from on high. So they didn't go to Galilee. Jesus appeared to them and told them to wait in the city of Jerusalem. And then it says in verse 52, they worshiped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. So they stayed in Jerusalem. But in Matthew, there's no going to Jerusalem and waiting. They go to Galilee. The 11 disciples went into Galilee. So in Matthew, he commanded them to go to Galilee, and they did. They received the Great Commission, and then the end. In John is so different than the rest of the Gospels. It's so different. It's hard. It's no wonder they call it, the synoptic Gospels versus John. John is so different. You can't even compare the Gospels. So a lot of what John says here is only found in the Gospel of John. Luke and Matthew contradict each other. Luke says they stay in Jerusalem, and it fits perfectly with the book of Acts. because in the book of Acts, they're in Jerusalem. They're obeying Jesus' command from Luke, volume 1, if you will, the Gospel of Luke. They're not going anywhere. They're staying in Jerusalem. And then the day of Pentecost comes, right? In Matthew, none of that happens. In Matthew, he gives the Great Commission. They go to Galilee, and it ends there with the Great Commission. Go and make disciples of all nations. That means the Gentiles, of course. So preaching the gospel to all, to basically the Great Commission is the command by Jesus to his 11 disciples to preach the gospel to all people, including Gentiles. In Luke, the Great Commission is not there. There's no Great Commission in Luke. He's not telling all of the 11 disciples to go and preach the gospel to the Gentiles. And if you put Luke and Acts together, which, really, come to think of it now, those are the only two books I would say putting Luke and Acts together, I think that's a great thing to do. I don't think putting Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John together is a good thing to do. Putting Luke and Acts together is good because it flows really good one to the other. In Luke, there's no Great Commission. The disciples do not know about going to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. There's no commandment to go to the Gentiles by the end of Luke. When the book of Acts starts, they don't know about the Great Commission. That's why when God commanded Peter to go and preach the gospel to the Gentiles, he didn't know about it. Actually, God had to give Peter a vision to teach him to do that. So Peter was the only one to know about preaching the gospel to the Gentiles, starting in Acts chapter 10. And then in Acts chapter 15, Peter reiterates that, saying, you all know that God chose me to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. If the Great Commission actually happened as per Matthew, and I know it's in the Gospel of Mark too, but that's in the extended part of it that is not in the earliest manuscript, so I'm not even counting that because that's a later edition. So if the Great Commission of Matthew is historical, then Luke is wrong, and the Gospel or the book of Acts is completely off. If Luke Acts is historical, then Matthew's off. Matthew's not right. Because if Jesus actually did command all of the 11 disciples to go into all the world, including the Gentile nations, of course, then they all would have known that that's their mission. Go to all the world. Go to the Gentile nations. But they didn't know that in the book of Acts, which proves that the Great Commission in the Gospel of Matthew is not historical. Again, it's another Haggadah by Matthew, made up. In the Gospel of John, do we have the Great Commission? Do we have the Great Commission in the Gospel of John? Let's have a look. So John chapter 20, Jesus appears. So the women don't know what happened to Jesus after they went to the tomb. Peter finally goes there, finds the tomb empty. Yada, yada, yada. They don't know anything yet. And it goes on here. There's no verses 19, 23. Jesus appears to his disciples. Jesus appears to Thomas after that. And then after 80, okay. Some people believe that John chapter 20, verses 21 to 23 is the Great Commission. Jesus therefore said to them, peace be with you, peace be to you. Shalom Alechem would be probably what he said. As the Father has sent me, even I send you. When he had said this, he breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they have been forgiven them. If you retain anyone's sins, they have been retained. But that's not really the Great Commission. That's not explicitly calling the disciples to go and preach to the Gentiles. So there is no Great Commission in John, no Great Commission in the earliest Gospel of Mark, no Great Commission in the Gospel of Luke, which fits perfectly with the book of Acts, but the Great Commission of Matthew, which seems to be another Haggadah. It's a story made up to convey a sweeping theological concept that covers the entire book of Acts. In other words, meaning that eventually, throughout the book of Acts, beginning with Acts chapter 9, Acts chapter 10, and confirmed in Acts chapter 15, eventually the call was to all of the world, or to the Gentile nations. But it wasn't as Matthew presented it. You can't have the book of Acts being historically true and the Gospel of Matthew historically true at the same time. Here it says, wow, how many Christians make that the main part of their doctrine? Yeah, exactly, for sure. Yeah. Thank you, Cuberts. Yeah, so it's not historical. At least, according to all the data that we have, in which I already submitted to you guys, the Great Commission is just a wrap up, blanket kind of story to cover, the book of Acts in a nutshell. Basically, just go into all the world and preach the gospel. Not really exactly what Jesus said to the 11 disciples. And we know that because of the conspicuous absence and the ignorance of such a teaching or a commandment in the book of Acts. Okay, folks, any questions? Any other questions you guys have? On TikTok, someone says, "How is someone saved?" You gotta love it. So people they're so locked in on simple concepts like this. My answer is exactly what Jesus answered. Okay, in the Synoptic Gospels. When the man came to him and said, "How do I get eternal life?" What did he answer? That's my answer. Voice of One on TikTok. Welcome. Blessings multiplied to you and yours. Okay. Yeah. Next Sunday, not tomorrow, but next Sunday, Lord willing, we'll have our members only private video conference for those of you who'd like to just kind of have a chat behind the scenes, so to speak. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on with the channel and more about the future of the channel. You guys can let me know what you think. If you have any questions, prayer requests, any kind of thing like that. Those of you who are on level 2 and higher on the members on YouTube and Subscribestar, level 2 would be, let me have a quick peek here. I think that's level 1 is the first tier of a membership, and that would be like $5 a month. And then there's level 2, which would be like $10 a month, or somewhere around there, $10 a month. So for those of you who are on the level 2 support tier and higher, I will be posting a link in the coming days for the meeting Sunday, April the 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. That's 1 p.m. New York time. So you can look forward to that link on YouTube in the members only post section, as well as on Subscribestar. I will be posting that as well. The short-term outlook here. So in the next several days, we will be focusing mainly on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, as we're in the middle of Unleavened Bread. We'll be talking about unleavened bread and how that ties in with the concept of humility. And then after that, I'm going to finish up what we started there on, what was it, Tuesday, just before the power went out. We were in the middle of talking about Bible prophecy, and I was in the middle of answering Chipmunk's excellent question. So I'm going to revisit that and answer that question. And then after that, we'll talk about free will versus determinism, or free will versus predestination. And after that, I do have I'm quite excited about this. I'm going to be doing a special live stream on the real first and greatest commandment. The real first and great, and it's not what you think. It's not what you think. The real first and greatest commandment. You know what? I'll give you a little bit of a hint. The first and greatest commandment, that whole thing, is only found in the Gospel of Matthew. Is that a hint? So the first and greatest commandment isn't what you think it is. So we'll talk about that after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, after the Bible prophecy video that we're going to complete, as well as the free will versus predestination discussion as well. All right, folks. If you haven't already, please leave a like, subscribe, and follow.